Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Jana Rentzel, and today I'd like to share with you a bit about the rich tradition and practice of Christian contemplative prayer. Christian contemplative prayer is the practice through which we grow closer with God and become more Christ-like. It's through the practice of praying contemplatively that we learn how to be still and to know God. So we enter into our inner room where we can connect with God's ever-present peace and love and joy at our innermost core so that we may become who we truly are in and with God. But who we truly are in and with God, who we are at our innermost core is our true spiritual self. That part of us has been obscured by the many veils of our human personality, our ego self, veiled by our obsessive thinking and limiting beliefs, veiled by our perceived need to prove ourselves and to defend ourselves, to judge, to blame ourselves and others, veiled by our efforts to compete with others and to accumulate things and to secure what's mine. All of these veils weave together to form our personal identity, our ego, an identity that keeps us believing that we're much less than who we truly are. So the ego self is who we've created ourselves to be. And in the process, we've covered over who God has created us to be, our innermost true self. We've covered over who we truly are. And then we believe ourselves to be that covering. We forget the radiance of who we are in and with God. Well, Jesus taught us how to move beneath and beyond these veils so that we can enter into that radiance of our true self at our innermost core. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus told us that when you pray, go into your inner room, shut the door, and pray to your Father who is in secret. So we must shut the door on all those distracting thoughts, on all those layers that obscure who we are at our innermost core, so that we can simply sit in the presence of God. It's here, after all, in our inner room where we can most fully and intimately know God. Now, what happens in this inner room is that God's ever abiding, loving presence begins to penetrate our ordinary, everyday awareness. We begin living with an awareness of being in the presence of God at all times and in all places. This brings a much more open and spacious and loving dimension to our life. It brings a new depth of holiness to everything we do and to everything that happens in our life. This is how Jesus taught us to pray, contemplatively. So let's begin with a very brief overview of the history of contemplative prayer within our Christian tradition. Just a small taste of the profound lineage of our Christian contemplative tradition. So based on the teachings of Jesus, the apostolic fathers and mothers, those were Christian theologians who lived in the 1st and 2nd centuries. They continued praying contemplatively. They referred to their meditative practice as prayer of the heart. And then in turn, the apostolic fathers and mothers taught meditation to the early church fathers and mothers who set the theological foundations of Christianity in both the Eastern and the Western churches. And then it was in the 4th century, a monk and theologian named John Cassian, known especially for his mystical writings on the importance of Christian contemplative prayer. This is when he taught this prayer of the heart to Saint Benedict, the founder of the Benedictines, who became known as the father of Western monasticism. And so the spread of Christian contemplative prayer continued. It was a very integral part of the Christian tradition. That is, I should say, until during the height of the Middle Ages and increasingly in the 17th century during the Enlightenment, or Age of Reason, as it was often called. It was during this time that a more intellectual approach to prayer, called prayer of the mind, prayer that uses words and thoughts to talk to God, it began to eclipse the more meditative prayer of the heart. And so at this point in the life of the church, Christian contemplative prayer began to be relegated to the monasteries. It was no longer practiced by the laity. And so it is therefore within the monasteries that the tradition of Christian contemplative prayer was preserved. And it wasn't until the 1960s when the Second Vatican Council opened its doors to a very robust and growing revival of Christian contemplative prayer. It wasn't until then that this contemplative way of praying ceased to be cloistered in the monasteries. So monks such as Father Thomas Merton and Father Thomas Keating, whom many of you have likely heard of, they began to develop methods of Christian contemplative prayer that were more accessible for modern people. And they began teaching it to lay Christians, calling it centering prayer, a more modern style of contemplative prayer. And so it's really important to understand that the Christian contemplative prayer tradition, it's not something new. You see, throughout history, there have been a cloud of witnesses in Christianity that have practiced and written about and taught Christian contemplative prayer. So this way of praying has indeed been a very vital and integral part of our Christian tradition. So let's take a closer look at just what is Christian contemplative prayer. Contemplative prayer is the opening of our mind and heart. It's the opening of our whole being to God. And it's this deep opening that leads to our inner spiritual transformation. You see, by praying contemplatively on a regular basis, our whole soul becomes filled with Christ. And we learn his ways as he comes to life ever more fully within us. We become increasingly Christ-like. The fruit of spirit ripens within us, those qualities such as love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, and faithfulness. Those qualities begin to show up within us and in our outer lives. And drawing upon these good-hearted qualities, we become better and more effective at meeting challenges, such as those we're now facing both individually and collectively. So we move from our head to our heart. That's the pilgrimage. That's the true spiritual journey we take to find God at the innermost core of our being. St. Augustine said that the whole purpose of the Christian life, the reason that we celebrate the sacraments, the reason that we read the Gospels, the whole purpose of the Christian life is to restore the eye of the heart by which we see God. To restore the eye of the heart by which we see God. This is what Christian contemplative prayer is all about. And so when we pray contemplatively, we're not thinking about God in the ordinary way. We're not speaking to God with words or thoughts or imaginings. That's prayer of the mind. In contemplative prayer, prayer of the heart, we go to an even deeper level. We move into the core of our heart and we simply rest there in silence and in stillness in the presence of God. That's where God lives within us in our heart of hearts. And so it's really very simple. We're simply being with God, resting in God, in our eternal oneness with God, where we are, as St. Paul says, hidden with Christ in God. In Colossians 1, verse 27, Paul also says, the mystery of Christ, the mystery is Christ within you. The mystery is Christ within you. He is in you, with you, always and in all ways. And so in Christian contemplative prayer, we simply go to be with God, to be in his holy presence, to soak in his wisdom and his love and his guidance. You might say we steep ourselves in God, and in doing so, we're transformed by God. Through the practice of Christian meditation, we learn how to have a peaceful heart, even in the midst of suffering and anxiety. We learn how to maintain deep faith, even in the face of doubt. We learn how to hold on to hope, even in the face of despair. And we learn how to love, even in the face of loneliness. You see, meditation takes us right into the heart of peace and faith and hope and love. We don't have to solve all the problems in our lives and then have peace. The peace is already there. And contemplative prayer teaches us how to access that peace that passeth all understanding, that peace that is always with us at the innermost core of our being, in our heart of hearts. We don't have to alleviate all of our doubts in order to have faith, because faith is already there. We can never lose hope, because hope is always there. And we don't have to search for love or work to be worthy of love, because love is always there at our innermost core, in and with God. After all, contemplative prayer takes us right into the infinite divine light that lies at the heart of all darkness. Again, it's the peace that surpasses all of our intellectual understanding. It's the love and the hope that shines through all of our despair and trouble. This is the light and love of God within every fiber of our being and within everything that we experience. With that, as we come to the end of this presentation, I'd like to let you know about an online Christian guided meditation group that I lead every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Every Wednesday at 5. It's sort of a contemplative happy hour. It's free and you can simply attend whenever you like. It's an amazing group of like-minded and like-hearted people who seek a closer, deeper walk with God. So each time I lead a 20 to 25-minute guided meditation. And then while you're free to leave at the end of the meditation, for those who stay, we spend the rest of the hour sharing and discussing. Just a very rich time of spiritual community. So I really highly recommend that you try this. And so if you're interested and would like to receive the Zoom link, please let me know by emailing me at the address shown here. So I want to thank you for listening to my presentation. And I really look forward to hearing from you if you have any questions or comments. Thank you and God bless.